One of the most interesting and talented musicians I've ever played with is Hector Serrano. Weekends I wasn't playing with Wise Guy, I was playing for Hector. I found those guys right on my home scene. Hector with his band Hex were playing all over the Clear Lake circuit, and he had teamed up with my old pal out of the Box of Rocks, Mark Thigpen. Hector was one of the best showmen I've ever played for. He really knew how to work the crowd. Oftentimes he'd toy with the audience and make little jokes, and it's part of the show. People really liked that. Hector had been in the circus as in Barnum and Bailey, as he was like a ringleader. He could work any crowd. As a three-piece, I gotta say that we were really strong, all these musicians. We just knew what each other was going to do on stage at any given time, any given moment. Together with my old bass player from the Box of Rocks, Mark Thigpen, the lineup up front was incredible. These guys were like the axe slingers supreme. They were like a force to be driven with and dealt with. And being behind them and playing behind them, the power was just incredible of this band. Honestly, the chemistry in between the two was just incredible. These guys, they'd line up in front and get in stance and play their guitars and just rock the house's ass off. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Every gig I ever played was fun. Hector made that place fun. Not only did we have fun with the crowds, but I think we also had a lot of fun messing with each other on stage. I mean, sometimes one of us would go way out there on a guitar part or a drum part. We'd turn around and look at the other guy like, what are you doing? And it would somehow all fold back and mesh together. And that was the fun part, is one of us would play something slightly different than what we thought. We'd turn around and give the other guy just a devilish smile with horns coming out of our head. No matter where we played, if it was dead when we started, it wasn't dead 5 minutes after that. I mean, this band definitely attracted attention, and we were going to have a good time if the whole room was empty or not. We didn't care what y'all did out there. I mean, honestly, the chemistry between Mark Thigpen, Hector Serrano, and myself, we just knew what each other were going to do on stage at any given moment. And sometimes we'd push the limits of that and toy with each other on stage. And oftentimes that worked out and even made it more interesting. One thing that I will say about Hector Serrano is he had the talent of the ballad, and the guy just had golden pipes, and when he would sing a ballad, the whole room would just fall into silence. He just had an incredible grip and an incredible passion and incredible grip on a room. Whenever we bust into any ballad, everybody would just sit back and listen. A lot of times listening to him was a very soulful experience. I mean, talk about performers that take over a room. That was the one thing cool about playing drums for this guy, is whatever room he walked into, he just walked in with an air about him like, hey, everything is cool. And then before you knew it, he took over the whole place and the whole scene and everything. He had that room, every room, right, just digging right out of the palm of his hand. Oftentimes we'd be late, and I'd be looking at my watch. I was like, Hector, aren't we supposed to start like 10 minutes ago? He'd like, chill, man, be cool. And then about 15 more minutes would go by. I'd say, aren't we supposed to hit stage? He'd say, let it marinate. And that was true. A lot of times we never started on time, and by doing that, we let it so-called marinate. The crowd would just go nuts the minute we walk on stage. Actually, it's kind of funny. I think there was one club owner one time that said, hey, are you guys on break or are you guys on vacation? But it didn't really matter, because when we did get up there and play, we made sure that you got your full 45 minutes worth of good rock show. And most times we do about 3 to 4 sets. Some nights when things are going really good, 5. But while we were playing, like for me, it was a rush because I could close my eyes and use the system I always called the movie. I didn't have to worry about what the other two guys were going to do. I could hear them them. I knew what moves they were going to make, what breaks they were going to do, what leads they were going to play, or about, I shouldn't say I knew everything they were going to do, because a lot of times we mess with each other on stage. And sometimes, like I said, we look over and look at the other guy and say, what in the hell are you doing to that guitar? And Hector sometimes would pick up a bottle or a glass slide or play it upside down or behind his head or use a microphone stand. But whatever he did, it came back around. It was really kind of cool how he did it in his leads. I guess you could describe his style of guitar playing as just really, really smooth. I mean, the parts just kind of crept up on, or should I say, we took all the rules of music and Beethoven and Mozart and we just crumpled up and threw them out the window. If we wanted to play out of time, we played out of time. If we wanted to play out of key, we played out of key, and we somehow brought it back into key and brought it back into time. We were just that tight of a three-piece that we could just monkey around with stuff that every now and then just give our own self a giggle on stage, regardless of what the crowd was doing. So being able to screw around like that live on stage and just get a giggle out of ourselves was half the entertaining part. I mean, the audience was cool, but I don't think they ever caught on to what we were actually pulling off up there. A lot of times we kept ourselves very, very amused. At times it was like the Three Stooges seeing how far you could stretch a rubber band before it would snap, but one of us would turn around, look at the other, and just have a devilish smile with horns growing out of her head, just to mess with the other guy on stage.
Thank you. Lucas Groceries. Merci beaucoup.
Of course, what was also cool about playing with Hex is that we always had side players coming in, and we had guys like Steve Knight and also Jimmy Rucks, and these guys were coming in and played on the side. And when we played with Steve Knight was incredible as far as 50s music, man. He could just play guitar just like Dick Dale. And we did Wipeout and did a lot of things, and people really freaked out. It's that was kind of a special guest and something special. Also, when Jimmy played with us as well, it was like having a special guest or something that the audience wasn't expecting to see at a Hex show. That was also part of the cool thing playing drums for Hex, is that we had a lot of visitors and a lot of special guests. Jimmy Rucks and Steve Knight and Derek Piper and singers. We had girls come in and sing. We had all kinds of guests that would show up and play our gigs with us, and so thus letting it marinate, but more the term of a big open mic. The more the merrier, and as that kind of thing establishes when you play in a band, when you have a bunch of people following you, and you have a bunch of side players who want to get up and play, then people want to go out and have a good time because it makes it fun for everybody, because that's kind of like a jam band thing, and everybody gets a turn to get up there and have their moment in the sun, and that really makes things fun. And I mean, we had a lot of fun doing that. I mean, it's so simple, but you know, things like somebody said more cowbell, or I think this needs more cowbell, which is kind of a joke. But I mean, at the same time, you know, when you got guests coming in and plays, well, you know, that's introducing everybody into the club scene, and pretty soon you turn around and these guest players are booking their own gigs. And that's what's cool. That's a brother helping a brother in the music scene. Man, we had a lot of good players that traveled along with Hex, and Hex just ate it up because Hex is just letting everything marinate, man. And I'm going to go back to the back and have a few more shots of Rumpelmints. You guys play a 50 set, and that's what we used to do, and it sure was a blast. A lot of times I kept duct tape all over my drums. That's one of my biggest drumming secrets. My drums, I hit hard and I hit loud. And so I'd cover my stuff with tape. And the more tape I put on all my stuff, you know, it would bring the volume down. And according to place, I'd tear tape off or put more tape on, depending on how much they bitched and how loud it was. Hex was playing all over, especially in LaPorte, Texas, where they had places like Main Street Station, which is what you see here. It used to be an old Phillips gas station. The place was small, but we made it into a jam. They also have the famous Blondies, which we played all the time, and Neon Moon. The Hex was well known in LaPorte, Texas, but I had no idea. I mean, we were playing all these places, and we were doing really well as a band. We hadn't really followed it, but I had no idea of the gig he was going to call me for next. So I'm sitting at home one day, probably barbecuing, and I'm looking over the list of gigs that I had coming up in the future, and Hex calls. He tells me, I'm looking at your calendar, I see you're already booked, but I really need you for this one gig. I said, well, I don't know, I hate to cut one gig for another. What gig is it? And he said, well, I got an opportunity for us to open for Ted Nugent. So naturally, I worked it out with the other band I was booked with. I called him up. I said, hey, I have this opportunity to go in and play for Hex and open for Nugent. And they certainly understood. So they had somebody else stand in for me at that gig. And I found myself right there opening for Ted Nugent at Pasadena Rodeo. And I mean, what a welcome back home that was. I'd only been back there for maybe a year. And already, there were 5 local bands that got to open for Nugent. We were the last band that got to play before Nugent. That day was really, really special for me because, I mean, let's face it, I was starting to get old. I mean, and to return back to a live stage of that capacity and look out there and there'd be about 10 or 12,000 people just jumping up and down all of a sudden. The last song that we played was Down, Down, Down in the Burning Ring of Fire, which we played at the speed of light, and let me tell you, they were going down in their burning ring of fire. I looked out there and there were cowboy hats just bouncing up and down, and the whole place was just rocking. I'll never forget that day. So it's one thing when you return to your hometown and you're playing bars and you're playing clubs and outdoor events and stuff like that, but it was quite another thing to be invited to open for Mr. Ted Nugent, and that was really, really special, especially at the Pasadena Fairgrounds. And I mean, that late in life, I really expected never to get on a stage again that large. I'd been on before, but that would certainly open up the way for the next few years. That what was to follow coming the next few years, it just moved on to even bigger and better things. I can honestly say at this point in time that it was like other times in my life where I didn't really have to do anything else other than play music, and that's a really good feeling when you're just playing gigs and you're surviving just playing gigs. What was also cool about this is that I really didn't have to travel that much. Whatever city I was in, whether it be Houston or Dallas, which seem to be the two most cities I'm in most of the time, I never really had to travel that far outside of them or travel any long distances because all the gigs and everything we need is right here in Texas. Hey. Like I said, I never knew what Hector was going to do, and right after our first song that day, Train Train by Blackfoot, Hector announced my drum solo. Honestly, to tell you all the complete truth, my solos are never structured. I never have any idea what I'm going to do. I never really plan it. I try to plan little sections in my head, but they never really work out. I never stick with them. I've tried writing things on the drum heads. I was going to do things in a certain order, but that doesn't work out either. I don't really know what it is, but sometimes I draw faces on a tom-tom or a snare drum of somebody I'm really pissed off about and beat the ever-living shit out of that twice as hard. But I really don't have any theory about how I do my drum solo at all. It's just kind of a absolutely go ape shit kind of thing, and that's the way I've always done them. So there's really no process to where I transfer from triplets into quads or anything like that, or any kind of rudiments or anything that, I just kind of throw all the rules out of the window and just kind of beat the crap out of all my stuff. Sometimes, I do have a crack habit, and it's the fact that I crack a lot of cymbals. I don't know why that is, but cymbals are an expensive habit to get into, and I mean, I've tried them all. Zildjian, Paiste, Meinl, you name it, and whatever cymbal you put in front of me, well, give me a couple of years, and eventually I will crack it. I will also say that I'm a big fan of the Cowbell Club. If you're going to play a drum solo in Texas, you better have a cowbell somewhere on that kit. That's just all there is to it. One thing I'll say is at the end of my solo, what I'm doing is I'm always pushing myself to the utter edge, beating the shit out of everything as fast and as hard as I possibly can. So I guess you could say that my secret to my drumming is being somewhat of a spaz, which I've always been. It's nice to be in a band where you can get caught up in the moment and I can just concentrate on being that spaz and playing my drums and not really worry too much about what the other guy's going to do, because I'm that comfortable, and I've played with most musicians before in bands or at different times in my life, that when you get up there, that's almost like the theory of a lot of these bands. We never had to practice. We just show up and do the gig, because we'd call each other and say, we got this gig, or I got this gig, and the players that showed up were just good enough to do that gig. There was definitely an energy playing with Hector Serrano, and it's 1 minute we'd be doing a ballad and it would be real soft and real touching, and the next minute we'd bust into something that was just balls to the wall, like Born to Be Wild. There was a definite brotherhood in this band, and we all believed in the same things, and we all politically kind of believed in the same things at the time. And one of the things Hector would do, one night he surprised me at Neon Moon. He said, look behind you, look behind you. And I'm like, what do you want? And when I looked behind me, I could see something wrapped up, and I handed it to him, and it was an American flag, and he was just came out, and he was waving the American flag all over the front of the stage, eventually draping it over himself and walking off, and the audience just went nuts with that. And that kind of thing, that kind of statement may have actually kind of attracted us into opening for Nugent. I'm really not sure, but it made a statement everywhere we went, and when we pulled that American flag out, people naturally just respected that. There was no doubt about the loyalty and patriotism behind the band Hex at all. Looking back on my whole experience playing with Hex Band, I will say that at the time, it didn't seem like much, or it didn't seem like anything, but I don't think we really realized it, or I really realized it, but those were some of the best times right there. And I can see that now, but possibly we didn't see it then, but those were some of the funnest shows and some of the best times I've ever had with any band I've ever been with.